Hello and welcome to Daily Debrief, brought to you by People's Dispatch. I'm Pragya. Today we talk about the United States claiming its forces have killed al-Qaeda chief Ayman al-Zawahiri in a strike. The UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres warns nuclear annihilation is imminent, and in the UK an update from the race to become Prime Minister. United States President Joe Biden claimed on Tuesday that al-Qaeda chief Ayman al-Zawahiri was killed in a missile strike by American forces. The strikes were on a house in the Afghan capital Kabul. The United States withdrew its forces from Afghanistan last July, leaving the country to the Taliban, and after 2 decades of occupation mired in internal conflicts. Zawahiri's killing is, to the US establishment's success in the so-called war against terror, a war that has left in its wake conflicts across the Middle East and many other parts of the world. We spoke to Abdul from People's Dispatch about this development a short while ago. Hi Abdul, thanks for joining us. Welcome to the show. Abdul, how do we look at the killing of al-Zawahiri? Is this the end of the al-Qaeda? Was he a major global force? What does this mean?
As far as the last part of your question is concerned, I don't think we should see it as an end of al-Qaeda. Primarily because since a very long time now, al-Qaeda has become a very diffused, quote-unquote, franchise-based organization. It has branches all over the world, including primarily in sub-Saharan Africa. And therefore, killing of one person who was already quite old, was mostly inactive. He may have played very important roles when he was during the early days of al-Qaeda in late 90s and early 2000, during the attacks on US and other places. But he was quite inactive for a very long time, and it was the different branches, quote-unquote branches, of al-Qaeda in different other countries which were independently taking up and are taking up attacks and so on and so forth. So killing of Zawahiri, if it is true, there are claims, the Taliban spokesperson said that yes, there was an attack in a residential colony, but no one died. We do not yet know whether this claim is completely true. There have been claims many times in the past, and on most of those occasions, Zawahiri released a video in which he basically refuted the claims. Of course, it was obvious evidence against earlier claims. So I think it is true. Of course, it is a major achievement for the US, but I don't think it is the end of al-Qaeda. Yeah.
Right, Abdul. Abdul, what about the war on terror? Does this look like it will mark the end of that long campaign which America has led around the world and which has caused a lot of fallout? Do you think that will end now?
Of course, if we think that killing of one or two individuals, after there were similar questions raised after the killing of Osama bin Laden in 2011, and 11 years down the line, we know that whoever predicted such thing was naive. And I think we should not see it as an end of terrorism. Terrorism, and particularly terrorism coming out from the West Asia and Middle East, had a structural reason behind it. And that until that structural reason, the imperialist interventions in various countries, maneuverings, anti-people maneuverings, kind of sheltering occupation in Israel, in Palestine, until all those injustices, the war, unnecessary wars, through sheltering the ruling classes against the people, and putting one set of people against another set of people, all these maneuverings and interventions which have been done by the imperialist forces and primarily the US, until that ends, it would be naive to think that terrorism will go away from this world. Yeah.
So a sort of permanent state of being at war would remain unless you address the root causes. Okay, Abdul, thanks for joining us, and we'll be back with you in just another minute. At a long delayed month-long meeting that began on August 1st, Antonio Guterres, the UN Secretary General, warned of risks to humanity from the proliferation of geopolitical weapons. He cited the Middle East, the Korean Peninsula, Asia, and the Russia-Ukraine conflict to say countries must follow norms against proliferation. Signatories to the Non-Proliferation Treaty meet every 5 years to review their commitments. The last meeting was scheduled for 2020. At the meeting, Russian President Vladimir Putin sent a message that the nuclear war must not be fought and cannot be won. We spoke to Abdul about this meeting earlier today. Abdul, this warning from the United Nations comes at a time when there is a great amount of posturing, the US and China, there seems to be unnecessary provocations going around. So what exactly is the role that the powers of the world have played in terms of creating this nuclear threat which he is talking about today?
Well, that is a very broad question to answer, but just to say briefly on what is there, the real cause for what is happening in the world, what Guterres was saying, that there is a nuclear threat and so on and so forth, is not about not countries like North Korea or Iran. These are, of course, these are problems. They need to be addressed, and the world community has to. Of course, the approach which has been adopted by the US and the other global powers is not correct to address even these issues. But the real cause of the threat is primarily the failure of the world community to create an egalitarian and equal system of nuclear non-proliferation. NPT itself has a systematic flaw where it recognizes such a set of countries which can have nuclear weapons and nuclear technology, and the rest of the countries are treated as second-class citizens in the world community. Until that kind of mistreatment is addressed, this is a structural problem. No disarmament policy will succeed. Apart from that, the basic reason behind the threat is the kind of insecurity created by the imperialist forces. NATO's expansion, there is no rational basis for that expansion. There is no rational basis for provoking China on Taiwan. There is no rational basis for what US and its allies are doing in Eastern Europe, inducting countries such as Norway and Finland, and not addressing and not considering the real concerns raised by countries like Russia. So until that provocation, and we know that there is a solid logic, imperialist logic behind it. So until that, again here, as we were talking about in the case of terrorism, the root cause of insecurity is not what is happening in Korea and Iran. It is primarily who is provoking these countries, forcing these countries to adopt such mechanisms. And that basically is imperialism. So Guterres failed to address, while he was talking about threat of nuclear war, he failed to address that the root cause of that threat is coming from the structural inequalities in the treaty, NPT itself, and world community's failure to kind of control the provocations done by NATO and United States of America. These are the real causes for nuclear threat.
Yeah, Abdul, so, the JCPOA as well, it seems to be stuck, and there seems to be a suggestion that there's a, concern about Iran's role. Can you talk in brief about this warning and what that means?
Well, I'm really surprised that the UN Secretary General does not recognize that its failure to kind of convince US to remain, to rejoin the treaty. Instead, the statement reads as if Iran is deliberately not joining the JCPOA. Iran never left it. it was the US which left the treaty unilaterally, and therefore the responsibility is primarily of the US to rejoin it, not Iran to kind of make certain unnecessary compromises and submit to the dictates of the United States to basically and then convince US to rejoin it. So the JCPOA, whatever is happening, is primarily it is a result of some kind of duality which is followed by the international community. Even IAEA, for example, when the chief of the IAEA visits Israel, which has well-known fact that Israel has nuclear armament, and takes its concern to basically ask Iran, which is the cooperative country, which has a long history of cooperation with the IAEA, which is a signatory of NPT, to basically be sensitive towards the concerns raised by the nuclear armed country. Then basically, of course, it seems that even the international organizations, which were primarily created to support the global peace through disarmament and through restraints on arms trade and so on and so forth, have completely misplaced priorities, and they are doing the bidding of the imperialist countries, which is, of course, the US and its allies. So JCPO is basically an issue primarily because the real issues and the right questions are not asked even by the United Nations.
Right. Thanks a lot for that update, Abdul. Ballot papers have been dispatched to Conservative Party members in the UK to choose the next party leader and Prime Minister. Foreign Secretary Liz Truss has ended up ahead of former Chancellor of the Exchequer Rishi Sunak in a tight race for the top spot, with Truss believed to have the edge. The results will be announced on September 5, but the first weeks of voting will be key. The UK is going through one of its worst cost of living crisis in 4 decades, with soaring inflation and unemployment. We spoke to Anish from People's Dispatch just a while ago. So Anish, can we begin with you telling us about what are the differences between the two candidates? What do they represent?
Well, it's quite a very slight set of differences if we're looking at it, because at the heart of it, both of them represent some of the most core values, as they say, of the Conservative Party. On the one hand, we have Liz Truss, who is trying to cut down on recent promises to hike, not even like real hikes, but promises to hike corporate taxes. She is trying to cut down on hikes in insurance plans. She's also trying to attack at some level the national bargaining program for public sector workers. So this is the sort of person you're seeing on the one hand. On the other hand, you have somebody who is thoroughly, a thoroughly conservative, social conservative, if you want to say, in many ways. He has said that he will be cracking down on gender-neutral language in the name of women's rights, which has always been this sort of transphobic dogmatism all the time. There is also attempts at trying to, reform the current government's planning and expenditure, which which pretty much continues what Johnson had already, and is not giving us anything new. And this has actually affected his popularity in public as such, because of the recent cost of living crisis that the United Kingdom is going through, and the working class is being affected by, and his plans being no different from what Johnson has given already. And this only goes on to show that this is going to be just old wine in new bottle. And this is pretty much what the Conservative leadership contest is offering us right now. It's pretty much just two bad options, and we just have to decide which is the worst one, depending on where you stand on certain things. That's all.
Right, Anish. Anish, there is a real cost of living crisis. You just mentioned the workers and the ordinary people are suffering. So what do these two people actually have to offer in terms of solutions?
Uh, for them, their whole thing is to emphasize on the neoliberal policies. On the one hand, while Sunak wants to continue some of the existing policies, Trust wants to just go the whole Margaret Thatcher route and double down on privatization and cutting down expenditure and breaking down labor unions, which is one of the reasons why in recent past we have seen some significant concessions being made for working class people, especially for the more unorganized or the more poorly organized lot, like the gig workers or delivery workers and so on and so forth. So it is just that labor organizing that has actually won them necessary changes in their budget, in their wages, in the kind of contracts that they are given in certain sectors. It's limited, but obviously the answer is to expand that rather than to attack that and track down on that and erode systems that are already in place that support them in some ways. So this is the sort of options that the two are offering to the working class British people. And it really doesn't help the cost of living crisis because if you're not seeing any kind of real rise in wages, obviously it is going to affect everybody. But for them, it is pretty much, their efforts are pretty much focused on bringing down costs for corporates and companies. And that is not something that will obviously help people in the long run, or even in the short run for that matter, because we have already seen how corporate loot has actually affected and exacerbated cost of living crisis elsewhere around the world, and not just in the UK. So we're talking about this time when more than half of the British people surveyed are saying that they have skipped meals for an entire day in the past month, and that shows that the emergency measure that really needs to be done is that the government spends more on people, not less. But the two of them really just want to cut down on expenditure, cut down on expenses, cut down on social services. So this is really the kind of situation it is going for right now. Obviously, Trust is kind of in the advantage with recent endorsements that she has received. So we will have to wait and watch how it pans out in the next few months.
Right, Anish, thanks a lot for that update. And I'm sure this is a story we'll keep on following as it goes along. And that is all we have for you today. Thank you for watching Daily Debrief. Please come back to us tomorrow. For news and views like these, please visit peoplesdispatch.org and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter for regular updates.